Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life podcast. We are here with an incredible guest today, the one and only Carina Cunha, and she is the founder and CEO of Satori. She's also no stranger to startups with an incredible background in education as well as investment banking and other things. Carina, how are you doing today? And I was going to give you more of an introduction, but I just want to jump into the actual interview because you have such an interesting life. How are you today?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
The pleasure is all mine. You have started up an incredible company, but before we get there, I was wondering if you would be so kind to share a little bit of your background of the circuitous route you've taken to psychedelics. Like you started in Colombia and then you moved on from there. Can you share some of that story?
Yeah, and just to also make people aware, it's Columbia University, not Columbia the country.
Right. Well
Like
done.
people do ask that, and then I guess I do work with drugs, so there is an association. Um, Yeah, so I actually am originally from Brazil, so yeah, that also fits. Like, but I graduated from Columbia when I was 20 years old, so I actually finished the degree early with a major in economics and political science, and that's because I had so much trauma growing up that I wanted to be financially independent from my parents as soon as possible. So whenever I made choices in my career, it was to get that financial security and but then that actually didn't make me happy because when you're not being true to yourself, it's going to catch up with you. So when I was 24 no 23, I left New York. I was actually working as a management consultant after investment banking at the time, and I went to the University of Edinburgh to do a postgraduate degree in the psychology of different individual differences, which is basically what what's his name, Jordan Peterson talks about. And I really wanted to understand my mom's personality disorders,
Mhm.
what had happened to me, and that maybe made me so fascinated with psychology. So then for the following years, I was working very much on how the decision of decisions. So I actually have a consultancy company called Meta Strategy, which is like how behaviors are change and why people do what they do. And so with that, I became the managing director of Crimson Education in Europe, and then we grew the company to a multi-million dollar P&L. In a couple of years, they are now a unicorn. That was super fun. I really love the founder there. And then at that point in time, I was reaching like I was 29 and I was like, oh my god, I haven't achieved the things that I wanted to achieve in life. So I created a company called Nosy, and it was very ego driven because I wanted to create the next accessory for fashion, and I was very concerned about air pollution in London. And I was 3 months before COVID, I started having like flashes of people wearing face masks all around the tube. That was December 2019. And so I left the company, I left Crimson, and then I started Nosy. And it was crazy because 3 months later COVID happened, and people just thought I was really really stupid for creating something for your nose, not for your mouth. But at the same time, we had amazing PR, and that taught me a lot about how to grow a brand. And with the regulatory requirements that was necessary for us to make a product now in the era after COVID, it just became too costly to actually keep on going with it. And then I was doing consulting, strategy consulting, and I was working with Founders Intelligence, a really interesting company as well, that they help bridge the gap in technology between startups and corporates. And their sister company is Founders Factory. So Founders Factory had announced a partnership with Woven Science to launch one psychedelic company that year in their incubation program. And so I just like literally jumped on it. I think I was on Founders Intelligence for like a total of 3 months before giving my notice, because I was just super passionate. And it's crazy because I never thought I could actually speak openly about psychedelics. And they have been so instrumental in my life for the last 8 years that I have helped, hundreds of people in my personal life. And then being able to be public about it, it was, coming out of a closet in a way.
That is, it's there's so much there, and I'm curious. For 8 years, like you've had a relationship with psychedelics for about 8 years. Did you find that you had to do some work on yourself before you could help other people with them?
Oh, totally. Yes. Oh, yeah. Like that's actually one of the reasons why I am not as optimistic about the psychedelic industry as I was when I started, because we initially launched Satori as a marketplace for psychedelic retreats and integration therapists. And as I started to speak with a number of people in the industry and learn about various retreats, I realized the level of spiritual narcissism that we
Mm.
have in the industry, so much bypassing as well. And I changed the way that we operate a company to do almost like a psychedelic concierge. And I'm partnering with a retreat center in Oregon, because that is going to launch in Oregon around the fall. Because I do not trust a lot of practitioners and facilitators to have their integrity within themselves to actually lead clients and not put on their baggage onto them. We have a number of retreats that we really like, but I would say that that model of just sending people to a place without
Mm.
understanding what is actually happening, understanding who are going to be the facilitators, is something that I'm no longer comfortable with.
Yeah, it seems interesting to me to provide like the concierge service where, like, what goes into you deciding to partner with a particular retreat?
Yeah, so last year we did an outreach to a number of retreats, and pretty much like most, like 99% of them said yes. Only like one or two didn't want to pay a commission structure to us.
Mm.
Um, and it was actually like speaking to the people in the team, understanding their model, and then seeing what our customers liked. And one of the challenges that I'm seeing also in the industry is that a lot of times people are offering really long retreats, and people don't have the time to take. So we actually divided you know clients into categories, because you have these people that are a bit older in age, which are like, I call them retreat masters, and they have a lot of money because they are already successful. They tend to be older, and they are going to be going to these retreats and taking that time of like 1 to 2 weeks. But the people that I'm really trying to help are potentially newbies in the
Mm.
psychedelic, and they are a lot younger, they have less disposable income. So a number of the retreats that are out there and more famous, they tend to be too expensive for people and not provide that shortened guidance as well, because sometimes people just want a trip sitter. They don't want that entire yoga food experience.
Yeah. So you're able to match someone's personality with something that's compatible for what they. Is this something like I would sit down and be like, here's the problems I'm kind of dealing with, here's what I'm looking for, and then you can help them find something that kind of matches exactly what it is they're looking for?
Yeah, and I would say that the reason, like, and exactly what they are looking for, because if they are like, yeah, I want to be doing psychedelics in my apartment in New York, like, yeah, we cannot legally do that. Um, but it's more about that we have a one-to-one meeting with people, understand where they are at, understand their experiences, and share with them some of the options that may be available for them in their budget. I think that some misconceptions that people have is that they expect this to cost the same thing as a hotel,
Hmm.
and they don't realize that you actually have to pay for a facilitator and the entire structure around a company on top of just the stay, like on an Airbnb, let's put it that way. And so I think that there is some education around costs as well that you need to give to people.
It's interesting to me. I was listening to some of your interviews prior to this one, and like it seems for me anyway. Like I have a problem with like the corporate world. And that's like my own bias, Like I just don't love being treated like I'm a number instead of a human. And
Mm.
that seems to be something that, for whatever reason, maybe it's profit driven or maybe it's ego driven, or maybe that's just the way in which the structure of our society is built. It's kind of sad, but do you ever fear that maybe that sort of corporate model is seeping into the world of psychedelics, or is that inevitable for that to happen?
It totally is. I mean, like, if you actually look at the companies that get funded in the space, they are drug development companies. And
Mhm.
when you think about classical psychedelics, they're great. Like
Yeah.
I have some friends that are making a synthetic ayahuasca that is could be revolutionary, and I think that there is room for you to make that, because ayahuasca, there is so much variability, and the purging and things like that can make it so challenging.
Mm.
But classical psychedelics can really do the job, like
Yeah.
wow. And so people that are trying to change the molecules to just get a patent,
Right.
I mean, that's a commercial structure. It's not because you
Right.
actually really need to be improving the quality of LSD. And oftentimes I find that these new chemicals are not great. Like if you actually compare some of the new research chemicals that you can even find on, like a black market, they
Yeah.
are a lot worse than the real deal.
Yeah, a lot of the times when we begin to try and impersonate something, it's just that it's an imposter. And like all
Mhm.
imposters, when you take the mask off, it seems to have a sinister undertone to it, but it's interesting to think about, because on some level we need the industries to come in and help out with clinical trials and regulations on some level. And then on other levels, we don't want it to be tainted. It's interesting to be at the forefront right now and see this sort of reemergence of this marriage between pharma and classical psychedelics. It's interesting, I
Yeah.
think, to think about. What you've spoken about your affinity for, do you have a particular type? I know that in some of your posts you were talking that you had some really great experiences with LSD. Is that something that you prefer that over other psychedelics, or?
Yeah. Let's put it this way. I find that
Okay.
every psychedelic has a place in my heart.
Nice.
Like
Well put.
they, it's. I don't have kids, but like it's. But in a sense, there is just one that you get along that works really well for you.
Yeah,
Um, so let me talk about the others
please.
before I go into others.
Yeah.
I really like mushrooms in the fact that it has helped me connect with my feelings. So because of trauma, I was completely desensitized to how I felt. I actually would sometimes spend a couple of weeks without realizing that the person was not nice to me, and then I would have to have a friend tell me, and then because I wouldn't have an emotional reaction to it. So last year when I started Satori, like I could do psychedelics with a lot more frequency because it was sort of, I knew I needed to research, like um, market research. And so I was, doing mushrooms like one gram or so every weekend, to check in with myself to see how I
Yeah.
felt about the week. And that was really incredible in helping me have a shortened reaction to how I felt, and actually be able to align my feelings. And so now, for the first time in my life, I'm able to have, if people are not nice to me, I react spontaneously, like instantly. I can choose to react, but at least I have the feelings. But that was something that had been super repressed in me. So I'm very grateful. I also don't drink alcohol, so chances are, if there is an event, mushrooms could be an alternative. But and then let's see, I find ketamine is also super interesting. I think that combining it with other psychedelics,
Mm.
especially mushrooms and LSD, can be fascinating. I'm not a cannabis person because I have really bad anxiety, but I have heard pretty great things about combining the two. Um, and I do think that it's also important to say that the quality of the ketamine, unless you get medical
Yeah.
grade in the US, it's terrible, terrible. I have had really, really bad experiences that I embarrass myself expecting it to be the same quality that you would get in Europe. And the American one, it wasn't. Like you have something, you go into a K-hole, and it's not a ketamine
Mm.
because you're actually on a research chemical, because that is completely, so the quality in America of substances has been pretty terrible. Um, and then let's see, um, ayahuasca. I mean, it cured my existential crisis. When I was younger, I really was afraid of dying, and I wanted to see what happened after you die. And I have taken pretty large doses of ayahuasca, and it showed me everything, and I felt like super connected to source. That said, I'm not as big of a fan of ayahuasca as a lot of the people in the psychedelic world, because again, the variability of the brew. I would say that half of
Mm.
the ayahuasca experiences have had good brews, bad brews. And so sometimes if the brew is not done correctly, you may not see anything. Then there is that shamanic culture that is involved, which can also impact so much of your experience. And I find that depending of the culture, I really like the Yanawa in Brazil, but the Shipibo culture can be a lot of work, like it's very heavy. So unless you have a lot of trauma that you're trying to deal with, like, or something like a substance addiction, it may not be the best thing for you to do if you're just starting your journey with psychedelics. And I think that also when I see the quality of the ayahuasca, it doesn't travel as well as, like some of the more, let's say, pharmaceutical psychedelics. And so I also find that the quality outside of South America can be quite not as great. And so I think that ayahuasca tends, when I analyze it, it's a great experience, yes, but there is a lot of negatives as well, especially from the health risks, because if you're throwing up a lot and you may have low blood sugar levels, then potential drug interactions. So while the experience can be transformational, I don't necessarily think that that is the best path for you to get to that transformative state. And I do believe that you can achieve pretty similar experiences in very large doses of mushrooms or LSD. Then, DMT is also another one that is quite interesting to me. I mean, like we're just blasted off into a different dimension. Just like, I actually volunteered to get intravenous DMT
Mm.
with the Imperial College of Research study. But I was moving to LA, and so I wasn't able to
Mm.
be part of the study. So I mean, it's fascinating. I do think that it has fewer therapeutical effects than ayahuasca because you're blasted off into a different dimension. So how much information you're able to retain is very small. And then also having a foot in one dimension and a foot in yourself, which you're able to do with ayahuasca, allows you to bring back the issues that you want to explore. Whereas with DMT, you're just like cosmic hyperspace, multidimensional, So it's 5-MeO DMT. I only did it once, and I feel that it wasn't a large enough dose for me to have a complete opinion. But I just felt that I was being hugged by the universe, like in some ball of love. Then LSD. LSD, yeah. I love it because I feel that my brain is connected to a supercomputer. And if you actually look at the brain scans, your brain is never more active than on LSD. Every part of it is talking to each other. And at the same time, different than mushrooms, is not as emotional. So you're able to be approaching a lot of very challenging situations without having the emotional load. If I have a bad mindset and I go into mushrooms, I can actually have an experience that almost feels like an MDMA come down. But if I have a bad mindset, I'm dealing with a problem in LSD, I'm not going to have that pain. I'm going to just see the problem so clearly from so many directions and actually be able to align my actions and thoughts towards it. And then if you actually look at studies, it's the one that produces the most neuroplasticity. And then, like for me, when I was younger and I was really struggling in bad relationships, and I didn't, I and with meaning in my life, when I was in corporate, if I did a weekend, I would just do a large dose of LSD in my room, all dark. I would be thinking about the nature of reality, and I came up with these theories about time, quantum mechanics, that now people are just writing research articles, and I'm like, fuckers, like
Yeah.
we diagrammed wrong. And obviously I cannot put the time to prove them, but a lot of these metaphysical ideas as well, became completely true and logical to me under that state. and then you realize that you're going on the peak of, so the peak of the LSD experience, if you do a high doses, you cannot really do much and you're just an observer. But as you're coming down from the peak, it feels that you're really at a level that is very connected to source. And each step that you, each hour, you're coming down almost like the staircase of whatever source connects. And then as you come down, you are able to bring back more of your human experiences into that. And so as each hour post peak comes, you're able to deal with different levels of problems. So the first hour is like super spiritual problem, existential, and then like some personal problems, and then work problems. So you have, I like the length of time as well, because it's longer than mushrooms, that then you're actually able to access a lot of different things and process more. Because with mushrooms or ayahuasca, you have much smaller trips, which means that you need to choose what problem am I dealing with tonight.
Yeah.
Whereas with LSD, you have different layers.
That is really well said. I admire the way in which you explained it. Man, it makes me think. It almost seems like you can thoroughly understand the higher functioning of neuroplasticity, the way you explain, like coming down a staircase, and like you're talking about higher order, you have spiritual and then physical and emotional. It's interesting. It's almost like you can see or feel the different parts of the brain lighting up when you're in those different stages. It's fascinating to me. Do you think that, I'm sorry.
I wanted to say that one more thing that happens
Yeah.
to me, but that doesn't happen to everyone on LSD, that I freaking love, is that I can see music. But a lot of people talk about synesthesia, which is the colors. But I actually have another level of synesthesia, which I see the notes of music on the air, depending on the dose that I take. So like if you play Sweet Child of Mine on high doses of LSD, you can actually see the guitar riffs in the air. And I'm like, if you don't understand what neuroplasticity is, and if you you can literally see how your brain is connected and how different parts are interacting with each other, which for me is phenomenal. Like you can see your brain functioning, basically.
Yeah, I think you can see concepts, but more than that, it leads me to this idea that you don't really learn anything, but knowledge is revealed to you. And I think in certain states, like whether it's you writing about, some sort of futuristic function of time or the nature of time, or, some sort of mechanics or something like that, I think that you can actually have information revealed to you. And if you go back and you read the Homeric verses, or you go back and you read literature, or understand some of these ancient sort of texts, like I think they're explaining the same thing. They're explaining that knowledge is revealed to you. And it seems to me in some ways, the way we're teaching people today, like you go to school to learn from somebody else, but that's just someone else's experience. I think responsibly taking or exploring different states of awareness or different states of consciousness really allow you to learn the lessons of life. What do you think about that?
Totally. I mean, are we even learning, right? Because
That's a good question.
if you, depending of like if you want to go metaphysical or if you want to go scientific, you can make the argument that the brain is just a receptor of information. Right. And I had a bit of a spiritual awakening as well, which I was in very much like, I believe that there is that quantum entanglement, and your brain is a receptor of information. And then I met my twin flame, which I hated that concept. And then until I actually met a person that once I looked into his eyes, I started remembering past lives with him. And then I was like, what the fuck? And that completely took my ground away for a few months, because I never had access to that. So I did explore the nature of consciousness from the meta level, but I hadn't had those very spiritual experiences in the sense of being connected to the soul, like I stayed in the more analytical side of it. And when that came, I started following a lot of the work of people, for example, like Dolores Cannon, like Abraham Hicks, trying to understand a little bit of like how your consciousness is manifested. And when you actually think about it, we are just all almost loading a video game. Like whenever we are interacting, anything that is not in your awareness pretty much doesn't exist for you, and we are just co-manifesting our reality. Daniel Pinchback, which is a friend, like has a really good article on that, and the yeah. So I think that when you actually say, is information revealed to us, or do we actually learn? I feel that you need to break down, your higher self, which knows everything all the time, and then the human experience, which, if you follow Dolores Cannon's work, then you have basically created a contract to place certain experiences as a human for your soul to learn. And in that sense, it just becomes a nomenclature type of thing where it's like, you is you like making the cognitive leaps in a biological brain, something that you have created yourself, or is the fact that that's being allowed to you something that your higher self is allowing to come to you? I don't. We could have an entire hour talking about this, but yeah.
Yeah, it's mind blowing to me. I spend a lot of time in different states of consciousness, and I really enjoy being alone and thinking about different things like that. Of course, I love my family and relationships, and it speaks to the bigger picture of what we are as much as who we are. Like, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that we are everyone. Like, you don't really come into this world, you kind of come out of it. And when you do that, I think you begin to see like a paradigm shift. And maybe that's what psychedelics do for some people, and maybe different psychedelics do it in different ways. But I'm curious to get your opinion. Do you think that what we're going through right now is a giant shift in societal consciousness or societal awareness, maybe?
Yes. And have you been following the like 5 dimension New Earth movement?
No, I haven't. I'm going to write it down. What is it?
Yeah, that's also something that after I had that like past life remembrance, I was like, what the F? And then I started studying this. So Diana Cooper has really good work on this. So it's this theory that the Earth is a living organism, and the Earth has been functioning on 3D reality for a number of years, etc., and that now the Earth is evolving to become a to evolve to a 5 dimensional state. And fourth dimension is time, so like whatever is above time. And that these higher awarenesses and spiritual awakenings that is happening at more frequency for us all, is people actually waking up to the veil of lost, like veil of amnesia that we have as a human existence. And then when you start looking at Diana Cooper's work, and then Dolores Cannon, they approach the same topic from different angles. And the series that both of these have, is that apparently the Earth is a school, and there are a bunch of planets that are schools in the system, and we are one of the few. I think we are the only planet where you don't actually remember your connection to source, and that you have to find it within your life, which makes it the toughest school in the entire universe. And then there is a lot of stuff about aliens as well, which, again, when I started reading about that, I was like, what the fuck? But then it started, like, you start seeing that if you actually investigate it, it feels somewhat true in your heart. You cannot really pinpoint it. And yeah, I mean, like, what's to say that that something like this cannot exist in dimensions higher than ours? Because I always love to think about humans as as the analogy of like that big elephant, like where if you have a blind person and they are touching the tail.
Right, different parts of him.
Yeah. So when I was younger, the reason why I decided to initially go to psychology is that I was having really bad existential crisis at the time. And I always, when I was younger, I thought about getting a degree in quantum physics. And I really wanted to understand the nature of reality. But I figured out that if I have a 3D brain, I'm not going to be able to fully understand something at higher dimensions than me, because I'm just not going to have access to the tools that are required to understand something bigger than me. So then when I went to psychology, it was that I wanted the best that I could do was understand the functions, understand my experience of the reality. So if at least I understood how humans are approaching reality, then it would allow me to have a more complete picture. And I don't know, like there is quite a lot there, and some
Yeah,
of this stuff is gonna be very woohoo for people, and I do take everything with a grain of salt. But like it makes I rather read one of these things that reads like a fantasy novel than hear about Trump on the news or something like.
of course. Yeah, it's garbage. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this one. So, in the world of psychedelics, there's been for quite some time this idea of ego death or ego dissolution. But might it be a better way to describe it as alternative ego functioning? Like maybe that's what's happening if we talk about awakening or we talk about emerging as a different type of being. Doesn't it make more sense that like nothing's really dying in your brain, but the function of your brain is changing? I think that fits into your model of from 3D to 5D. And why wouldn't it be like that way? If we have the prefrontal cortex, it's like the newest part and it's changing shapes, and there's all these dendritic spines moving back and forth. Why wouldn't the ego be transforming from something that only sees us into evolving into something that sees everybody? Doesn't it make more sense to, this is just me kind of being wishful thinking, but doesn't it make more sense that it's not ego death, but it's alternative ego functioning?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I almost would like to split it into two concepts.
Yeah, please.
Um, because when I hear about ego death, is like if you experience that in ketamine, high doses of mushrooms, acid, etc., is basically your human ego taking not existing. So then you're just connecting to a higher self, and so I and I think that the first time that you experience that and you are able to realize that you exist beyond your personality, your
Right.
thoughts, your body, is quite transformational. And I do think that the ego dust is fitting for to describe that experience. The what I'm hearing from you is the transformative nature, which is not an experience; it's actually a process. Um,
Mm.
so I would say that what you're saying is just more the evolution after you have experienced ego death.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting to think about experience versus process. Can you speak more about like what do you think is the difference between a psychedelic experience and the process that happens after a psychedelic experience?
Yeah, I think that the experience can just take blinders off your eyes, and it really depends on the what people bring into the container.
Mm.
I like, as you can see, I'm a very analytical person, so my mind goes like
Yeah, I love
like
it.
every direction. But there are some people that are tended to be just more. I actually notice a relationship with personality types and different
Mm.
psychedelic experiences. So people that tend to be primarily sensors, they oftentimes look more towards things in the past in their psychedelic experience, and they often will be analyzing situations and things to a much greater degree and not go as much into the theories. And they sometimes can have more somatic experiences as well, and
Mm.
be like, these are the things that I experienced in my body at the time, and really be like, oh my god, I can feel off myself. And whereas like, intuitive types, they tend to go more into the abstract theories. um, and then when we are looking at what you're going to have in the psychedelic experience, if you have a lot of trauma, you may spend most of the psychedelic experience just dealing with the pain and
Mm,
trying to make sense of what happened to you, and then connecting the dots, and then trying to make an action plan for your life. So it's almost like Maslow's pyramid of needs, where you have
right.
safety and shelter in the bottom, and then you have all of the other layers on the top with self-actualization, being at the very highest. And so, if you're still trying to deal with your safety and feelings and everything in the middle layers, you're going to be approaching psychedelics there. And so you need to deal with your need for recognition, social acceptance, etc., before I think you're going to be really considering the thoughts of the universe, because those are going to come right before, for you in the pyramids. So what I have seen with people is that the more they approach psychedelics, the more um, they start getting this expansion of consciousness.
Mm,
So as people integrate, you basically need to understand where in the pyramid they are and provide them with support to make changes in their lives or deal with the problems at the level that they are, because they are not going to be able to go to the top if, like, for example, if they are in an abusive household,
mm,
they're having to deal with, like, a drunken husband. They will be trying to solve that problem first after the psychedelic experience, before they are like, oh my god, we are all connected, planet Earth is evolving. Like, let me unleash my
mm.
psychic abilities.
That would be a great infographic if you had Maslow's hierarchy of needs and then you could put Karina's hierarchy of psychedelics like right next to it and have it like that would be kind of sweet. Isn't it? It seems fascinating, but also incredibly sad to me that sometimes people are faced with trauma in their childhood and they continue to fight that trauma their entire life. I think that is one of the beautiful things about psychedelics is that maybe it gives people either the courage to face that problem internally instead of putting a band-aid on it and coping with it. I'm curious, do you think the purpose of trauma, let me put it this way. I think it's been my experience that the purpose of trauma is because there's something bigger than you that believes you should go through that trauma because you're strong enough to come out the other side and then help other people through it. What do
Mm.
you think the purpose of trauma might be?
Yeah, I actually wrote an article about that we did a rebranding on the website, and I haven't republished. But I experienced a lot of trauma in my life. Like,
Hmm.
I have been in coma before because of, like, I have a sugar intolerance. So I was studied by John Hopkins as a kid and had a back surgery. Like, um, that I have like a metal bars on my back, and beyond, like, stuff with a borderline narcissistic mom.
Hmm.
Um, that was very, yeah, very, very bad. So I know trauma very well, and for me, trauma indeed is a way for me to connect deeper with myself, understand things from a perspective that I would not otherwise have been able to access, and to be able to help others
Hmm.
that may not necessarily have the tools to deal with that. Um, so I'm grateful for the traumas that I have
Yeah.
had, but it has been a long process of doing that. This being said, I do find that there is a lot of people in the victimization mindset
Hmm.
and I find that some of them actually display characteristics similar to a cluster B personality type, so borderline and narcissism. You have a type of narcissism that is called covert narcissism.
Hmm.
Usually people use their vulnerabilities to try to manipulate you, and these are
Yeah.
the ones that are very difficult to spot because they are not like a typical narcissist, but they are basically going to trauma bond you with you. And I find that some of these people need the trauma because it becomes an excuse for them to not try to achieve in life. And then for them to also not need to work hard, because then they are getting other people to feel sorry for them. And so, and then there is the other angle of the psychedelic industry, which I'm not a fan of, is that I find that so many people profit from you being stuck in a healing cycle.
Hmm.
like
Yeah, totally.
and if you think about it, some of the incentives are not there for them to, for a coach to stop coaching you, for you to stop going to that shaman. So I find that a lot of times people, rather than just be like, my life is good, let me enjoy it, let me be grateful, they're like, I have a problem to solve, like, and then they start, they they may not have that that cluster B narcissistic tendency, um, but they are allowing the need for them to constantly be in a work mode prevent them from actually being happy and fulfilled and grateful in life, because if you find problems, you will always have stuff to fix, but there is also room in life for you to just live life with joy and play, rather than always needing to be doing work on yourself and take a little bit of that load. I'm not saying for you not to be a nice person and to not have a growth mindset and not to listen to the universe when it's giving you lessons, but like you don't need to be going to the jungle every like every, I don't know, like, not the jungle is not a good example because there is a limitation on how often you can go there, but there are people that go to ayahuasca circles every other weekend, and I'm like, guys, like,
Mm. Mm.
it's what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
maybe if you just enjoy life a little bit, it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard a quote one time that makes me think of that scenario, and that quote was, we got good news and bad news. The good news is we have plenty of medicine. The bad news is the medicine doesn't work. And it makes me think of people that just decide to take the medicine regardless of whatever it is, whether it's a substance or whether it is an emotional relationship. They take it, but it never works because they don't really want it to. And that brings me to this other idea.
Yeah.
It seems that, like, whether it's the world of finance, maybe the world of psychedelics, but definitely the world of medicine, we're so busy focusing on sick people, and it seems we're so busy focusing on debt. Like, wouldn't the world be a little bit better if we focused on, like, brains that work really well instead of brains that don't work that well? And, like, wouldn't the byproduct of studying highly effective brains in medicine and living a great life, wouldn't that effectively end up curing, like, a lot of the problems for sick people? Like, if you study what works really well, then you'll be able to go and find out what doesn't work. But it seems like our models are wrong. It seems like we want to study the brain that has dementia. We want to study all these problems in the brain. But I think we're looking at it the wrong way. Does that kind of make sense, or is that just too out there?
No, I hear you, and I think that the problem that we have in our society is that due to human evolution, we have a much greater incentive to actually prevent a loss than receive a gain. So there
Mm.
are many psychological studies around this. And then that translates to the entire incentive structure of VCs, and is kind of like the idea of a startup. Like, a startup needs to be a painkiller rather than a vitamin. And so if you, I totally hear you. I just find that it's a problem about how we have intrinsically been uh, our brains work with, like, a huge part of the brain that impacts our behaviors is the amygdala, the reptilian brain.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that is amazing with psychedelics, that you for the first time are able to access the amygdala while have the rational thoughts of your prefrontal cortex at the same time. But most often people don't have that. The amygdala is just there to try to protect you, to, like, when you think about the biological factors of our body, we have been built to prevent deaths, not to achieve happiness. And so when you actually look at natural selection, there is a benefit for us to never be satisfied,
Mm.
which, because if you are a person that is ever always satisfied, you're not going to try to optimize yourself, and then somebody else is going to evolve. So that dissatisfaction with life is something that is intrinsic to when you're creating a system where natural selection is the primary mode for evolution. Actually, like a couple of years ago, before my spiritual awakening, I was writing a lot about. I do have a book that I eventually want to write called Being Human, and looking into the 4 Ps. So psychology, philosophy, physics, and psychedelics, or physics, philosophy, psychology, and psychedelics, because that actually was the order of how I started approaching them. And I do think that we do have some, while a lot of these ideas are great, I also see limitations on just the neurological structures of the brain. And so I make an argument where, while it's really great when you tell people, like, let's save the planet, like, please do your part. If that person, again, is in the Maslow's pyramid of needs, right in the bottom, and them, like, they don't even have the headspace to not throw trash in a river. Like, I went to Myanmar, and it was the locals that polluted most of the place. And so with all of these things, I do think that we need to consider limitations on the very fact that we are running these animalistic processors, and sometimes give even credit to people that are trying their best. And sometimes I feel that part of being human and an evolved human is often actually overcoming our biology. Our biological nature may say that we are here, and then our mind makes us do something better. And so back to the original question, as to should we be looking at studying a good brain versus a bad brain? Yes, I think that we're doing a bit of work on that. But do I see this being something that is going to be done at a wider societal level? No, because people profit so much more from curing, from painkillers and vitamins.
It makes me sad.
I'm sorry. I need to bring a nihilistic perspective.
It's pretty true, but it doesn't mean that we can't begin the work in the foreground. It doesn't mean that we can't begin creating something now that could actually move us in that direction. And sometimes a spark is enough to start a forest fire, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
Sorry, and by the way, like, I do think that individuals can achieve that. I just don't necessarily. I just think that, like, for example, at a large corporate structure, it's like you can have an amazing individual psychedelic center that is doing phenomenal, groundbreaking work into elevating human consciousness, but you're not going to expect the pharmaceutical companies to get behind that. So I think you and I.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that we and I can be almost like, working on the indie side of the industry, and then, like, there's gonna be, so there are people doing this work, though.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. When we talk about the world changing, it seems to me that if the people that are paying attention, the rate of change is so fast. And when you look at corporate structures seem to me to be like the skin of a snake, and we are the snake, and we're shedding that. Like, when you look at people that are doing startups, when you look at like ChatGPT or all this new technology coming out, it seems it's just like pushing away the middleman and allowing the individual to rise up and take the place of a corporation. If you look at the way Rogan and Jamie can outperform Fox News and CNN. If you look at the way Carina can start, Nosy, or start something that can take the place of a giant corporation, and you can build a startup and then sell it and then start something else. It just seems to me that is the path on which we're moving towards. And that's a setup for my question. And the question is, do you think there's a race between technology and biology? When you look at like brain chips and people trying to fix the body in this way to get rid of our animalistic urges, that's one way of it. But then you look at natural psychedelics that seem to be evolving the brain in another way. It seems to me like there's this weird sort of race happening. I'm wondering if you see it as a race, or do you see it as something that's working together?
That's a very good question. I think that my answer before I had, a bit of the spiritual awakening last year would be, technology is important. Like, it's going to bridge the gap in our biology, and allow us to have that access, because I'm like, our biology can only work so much. But then after that, and after I started realizing that I think that there's incentive structures in our society to actually keep us from that amnesia of that veil of forgetting of
Mhm.
our connection to source. And then I had crazy spiritual experiences that were not, I wasn't on any psychedelics. I started like channeling entities and things like that. And part of that came to me um, when I have been just living a very clean diet. And so I do think that we don't understand the functionality of the human body above the dimensions that that our mind can cognitively think. So, but the more you start going to spirituality, you realize, we have different levels to your soul and to your energetic field. And I do think that this is not like mainstream knowledge, and I do think that some of that technology that you see in, let's say, 3D culture is in conflict with some of that other technology, and it can distract you from harnessing the potential that you have into in your spiritual side. So I was one of the people that took the vaccine because I was in the UK. I had to, I was in corporate. But looking back, I would not have wanted to take the vaccine after I had my spiritual awakening. And so I know I can be super controversial here, but because I don't necessarily know how it's changing my genetic
Hmm.
structure. And at the time, because I had an experience, like I would put psychedelics, yeah, they open my consciousness, etc. But I'm like, it's separate. And then I hadn't experienced the full vision of like what my spirit is, even though I understood consciousness, but I didn't understand the spirituality. Now that I understand the spirituality, um, I'm a lot more cautious about technology,
Mm.
uh, using that sense, because I do think that there is a movement to prevent awakening from large corporations, because I do think that it's not in the incentive structure, and it's kind of like that same repression of consciousness that you saw with Nixon when he banned LSD, and is one of the reasons why I actually I just got on TikTok. I'm still trying to figure out the platform, but I made a video about how in the US I have tried 10 different sources of LSD and everything is fake. And I do think that that's worse than people not being able to access LSD. Because if a person doesn't know what they're actually looking for, they're going to have this research chemical that is just going to give
Mm.
them visuals and not actually expand their mind. And then they're going to stop there. And so I I never had that in any other country in the world, by the way. So I'm like, is that some type of, and I never thought about conspiracy theories before. I'm like, is that some type of perverse way of preventing people from accessing something that can, within a night, change your entire worldview? Because I do find that the LSD is a lot faster than other substances for you to question society, because you have that, that time period.
Yeah.
And mushrooms, because it's more emotional, it's going to focus more on your individual self, and there is more work. But with LSD, if you don't have a lot of trauma and you're just questioning society, you take that and you're like, oh my god, everything is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a large part of that that's true. It's interesting that, you see San Francisco go from like the mecca of LSD, the mecca of consciousness shifting ideas, to like
Oh, bro.
just a horrible, I don't want to say horrible, but I'm sure that it's just not the same as it
Oh,
as it was probably.
yeah. I lived in San Francisco for high school. I didn't love it.
I didn't love it. That's funny.
Let's put it that way. I think
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
worse. Like, yeah.
Why do you think that the quality is so much better in other countries?
Um, I mean, in the UK, I think we would get probably from the Netherlands, and then
Right.
the Netherlands just has incredible quality. Um, What I have noticed with the, let's say the black market here, is that I think that people are just trying to make a profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and then I have had people, like I had this guy try to tell me, and I'm just being cautious about the words that I use, being like, we only use gel tabs because gel tabs are going to provide you a much better precision for the amount that you're going to have in it. And then I'm like, okay, I don't care between zero, like point, because the doses of, like, let's say LSD is like 100 to 150 or 200, like, so it's in 100. So I don't care about the precision of like 5, like, but then what I noticed is that this is a distraction, is a tactic for people to actually distract
Mm.
you from the fact that they're not even selling the real compound at all. So I saw that as a marketing tool that is almost like the magician trick. Oh, let me talk
Right.
about this because I'm not actually even selling the real stuff here. Like when I have gotten a real LSD, it's not on a gel tab. I never actually have seen real LSD on a gel tab. And the person is not going to be talking about the difference of like 5, which is completely irrelevant on your trip. Like, or like what is R-ketamine or S-ketamine? Like in Europe, you just have ketamine, and it's great.
It's amazing to me. Carina, I'm having a great time talking to you. I know I'm getting close to my hour, but um, what? Tell me a little bit more about Satori before we end up closing it here. Like, what do you think is the best thing that you've learned so far by starting this?
I would need another hour for that. I think that from my side, I really understood the dynamics of the psychedelic industry.
Mm,
And in the beginning, I was very naive because I tend to like to see the good in every person. And so I actually got caught by a lot of, like, in the traps of a lot of spiritual narcissism.
mm,
And so I think that what it really has taught me is how to be very discerning. And that's something that I wish I want to recommend for every person. It's like, because you're in a very vulnerable space when you're treating trauma, healing, when you're learning about things that seem beyond real, you're going to really think that that person is going to be there to help you and have the best intentions. But I see that there is more ego in the psychedelic industry than I have seen in any other industry,
mm.
which is something that is not making me love it, and wants to be very protective of who do I work with. Um, yeah,
It's the
let's
co-
put it that way.
it's the it's the cosmic joke, right? Like you think you're getting away from all of that stuff, and then there it is, right in front of you.
Yeah, it's like the most ego I have seen of any industry is in the psychedelics industry. So I do want people to be cautious of who they trust.
Right? It's so amazing. What are you planning on? It seems like that you move quite around a bit. So is Satori based out of the UK, or is it something that anybody in the world can get a hold of and then and
Yeah,
move through?
we do everything online. And I moved to LA, so I'm in Venice right now, because yeah, the market is just so much more well developed
Mm.
in the US. Um, and then we also work with clients one to one, in depending on their needs. And so, yeah, the best way to go about it is just go to the website, book a call, and then, like, me or my team is going to learn more about you, and then we start going from there. So it's just about making that all of the information I shared today actually relevant for that person.
And so that's the best place if someone wanted to find you. The best place for them to do that would be go to the website.
Yeah, exactly. And then if people want to follow me, I post on Instagram, I or LinkedIn. So it's interdimensional highness on both.
That's awesome. What can you send me the information or the article that you spoke about where the prefrontal cortex is talking to the amygdala? I think it's fascinating, and I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Is before I let you go, Do you have any like other events coming up? And we've already spoken, people can find you. So what events do you have coming up and what are you excited about?
I do. So I will need to jump because I'm already late
Yeah, I
for
know.
meeting. But
Absolutely.
I am actually speaking at the Sound Mind Movement Summit next weekend. So it's this one. Ah,
Okay. Nice.
so if you guys, I'm not good at this. If you guys
No,
want
it's
to,
good. We can see. Perfect.
it's amazing. It's to raise of the proceeds are going to go for brain research. Like, yeah. Anyway, we can go on a loophole about that, but it's going to be amazing DJ and really interesting talks about mental health.
Okay, Carina, thank you so much for your time. I know you got to go. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'm really thankful that you spent a little bit of time with us and my audience today. I think I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did. Reach out to her. All the links will be in the show notes. Carina, I'll let you get out of here. Have an awesome day. Okay,
Bye.
aloha.
Hello.